There you go. 200 watt solar panel, 200 amp lithium battery, 600 watt power inverter. Things are great. I don't know why I didn't do this 6 years ago. Finally decided to quit screwing around and let's upgrade the electrical system. So I installed a solar panel, a new lithium battery, and an inverter. So now I can run my AC power. The biggest ones I really want is the Xbox X and a TV, so I can watch movies, play video games, get on the internet, do whatever I want on the Xbox, right? Pretty much does everything. But we're gonna have to install this stuff. Now I just kind of jerry-rigged it, so kind of a proof of concept, and then try to figure out where I want to put the different pieces. Well, the inverter and a fuse, I guess, that's pretty much it. So there's a rich 200 watt solar suitcase. I'm just using the battery clamps, the alligator clamps to connect to the battery. It's a light blue battery, 200 amps, and I use it to replace the 100 amp AGM battery. Now, since it's an AGM battery, you're only supposed to use 50% of its ability. So that means it's really only a 50 amp battery. But a lithium battery, you can use the full amount, so that's 200 amps. So even though it's a bit bigger than the AGM battery, that's basically 4 times the capacity of that battery. Now, just for a proof of concept, I'm just using some wires I had. Routed it back into the inverter. It's a 600 watt inverter. Oops, sliding around. So I'm going to install it up there. So I got a typical TV, comes in our pod, but it's an AC powered one. An Xbox X back here, so I can watch movies, DVDs, Netflix, you know, everything I can watch off of this. But I needed AC power for both this and the TV. So the inverter down here, 600 watt power inverter. I'm not sure how to pronounce that word, K-Psi, whatever. I'm gonna mount it up here, just bolt it up, and that should work pretty good. Then it's got the 2 outlets, and that way I can run whatever I want from right here. Now, the tricky part is running the wires. Drill holes through the cabinet, coming down through the backside, through the drawers, and the backside of the drawers, and then run underneath the shower, come all the way back up to here to the box, and that's where I'll get my power. Just a simple 600 watt pure sine wave inverter. Pretty simple, nothing crazy. Plug in the 2 leads from the back and then plug in your appliances to the front. Now the problem I'm having though is the 4-gauge wire, partially because of where I'm at in Quartzsite, Arizona. Ran over to Parker and looked at a couple different hardware stores and couldn't find 4-gauge wire. I did find 6-gauge wire, which probably worked just fine as well. I'm not using high amperage, but I figured I'd go ahead and use 4-gauge wire. But trying to find 4-gauge wire, it's a different story. It's generally, I think it was one hardware store for 6-gauge wire was $220 something, $230, and then 4-gauge wire was like $250, right, per foot. Turns out though, by going to Walmart, I can get 4-gauge wire pretty cheap for $25 in jumper cables. So 20 feet, 4-gauge wire. So instead of having to buy 4-gauge wire, total of what's that, 40 feet there and back twice, that would have been $100 at $250, right? $250 a foot. Jumper cables 20 foot long, just whack off these ends, $25. This works out like something like 60 cents a foot instead of about $2.50 a foot. So this was a steal. I just gotta whack these off. And I have 4-gauge wire, 20 foot of it. So this way I can route this cable now, instead of having to route the cable twice, right? I just route one cable, one time, and I got my 2 leads. There we go, good to go. The upside with this light blue battery is there's an app for your phone. In this particular case, you can see the status of the charge is at 99%, the voltage is 13.7. The rest of the information is not as important. Capacity is 202.9 amp hours. It's a 200 amp hour battery, so it's a little bit more than what it's supposed to be, right? Currently shows it's discharging, but that's pretty much all the useful information really is this one right here, status of charge. Flip over one more, I can see the current use of the battery. It's taking out 2 amps, and it's at 13.7 volts again. Now here I can see the temperature of the battery and how many cycles it can do. So this is a little bit less useful information, but keeping an idea of what the temperature of the battery is not too bad of information. This just shows events. Of course, there's nothing to show, and then contact information. So it really comes back down to status of charge and how many amps are going out and in, as well as the battery voltage. That's the big advantage of having this battery. I don't have to buy a separate battery monitor and install it, I just use my phone and get the same thing because the battery has Bluetooth. Now, having seen how this system works today, using this battery monitor on the phone and then also on the solar suitcase, it also tells me how many amps and voltage as well. I've determined that with my Xbox running and the TV running and watching internet TV, I'm using about 7 amps. So that's a 200 amp hour battery. So that's roughly 28 hours of usage I can get out of that battery before I have to charge it back up. Now, ideally I wouldn't want to do that. Now, it turns out though that solar suitcase gets me about 11 amps. So using 7 amps to run the TV and Xbox to watch TV, that leaves me with 4 amps that can be used towards charging the battery back up. Not a lot, but the fact that I can use all this and still charge back up the battery, that's a pretty good deal. And this morning I had a battery down to, I think it was 23% of capacity. Started up the little generator I've got and ran it for, I think it was 2.5 hours, and I was able to fully charge up the battery as well as having the solar panel hooked up. I was able to tell I got the battery fully charged up because I could see on the solar meter that there was no current coming from the solar panel to try and charge up the battery. And then once I turned off the generator, I can use the phone. I could see that the battery was fully charged up and I wasn't using any out of the battery. It was all coming out of just the solar panel. So that works out pretty good for me. There you go. 200 watt solar panel, 200 amp lithium battery, 600 watt power inverter. Things are great. I don't know why I didn't do this 6 years ago. Now, the key part to all this though is I need my phone to work. And if I'm using my phone for an extended period of time as a hotspot, right, for the internet, it'll slowly start using up its battery capacity, right? Ta-da! Enter in an Anker portable power pack. So I've got the Anker portable power pack. It's 20 milliamp, I think. Well, whatever the capacity is, this little guy here is what's keeping my phone fully charged, so I don't have to worry about the phone dying on me, while I'm also attached to the Anker power pack to keep the phone going. Just set it up here and forget about it. Watch TV all day. So I've drilled 2 holes into the wall. There's actually 2 pieces of paneling I had to go through. Routed a cable through this side into the cabinet. Came through the wall, went down through the floor. Just a single piece of paneling again. Just used my drill and just made 2 holes or 3 holes and drilled through. And then just routed down through here. And then took it down, routed up underneath the shower. So it's gone along the edge of the shower, through the vent. Now it's got to go the rest of the way to the board, right? So if you ever wondered what was behind this panel, there you go. What a rat's nest. And there's the plumbing. There it is. It's way back there. You see where the cable is. I just got to come the rest of the way here. And then I'll punch out a hole back here in the plastic. And then just mount it up here to the board. I tried coming in onto this terminal with my 4-gauge wire, but it turns out there's not enough space to get in here. This 6-gauge wire takes up too much space. So since I couldn't get the 4-gauge wire and the 6-gauge wire both into here, what I ended up doing is on the back side of all this wiring, I just spliced into my red and black 6-gauge wire and put my 4-gauge wire in between. So now I'm splicing the back side to the 4 and 6-gauge wires together. And just put it all back together and turn it on. Xbox is on, TV's on, inverter's running. Got the fuse installed on the positive side. Routed the cables through the closet, down along the floor. I tried going into the terminals, but wouldn't fit, so I had to splice into the back side. Got the battery all hooked up and the solar panel. That's the job done. So let's see, lessons learned. I should have done this 6 years ago. Should have used 6-gauge instead of 4-gauge wire. Since the battery is already pre-wired for just 6-gauge anyway, I should have just stayed with 6-gauge. It's cheaper than 4-gauge. The 4-gauge was too big to try and go into the terminals. 6-gauge might have fit. I might have still had to splice in the back anyway. I only needed like 13 foot of wiring instead of the full 20 foot, so I had 7 foot of extra 4-gauge battery cable left over. Using battery cables is definitely a way to go. considering it's like 60 cents a foot by $2.40 a foot. So all that knowledge stand in the way of progress. Go ahead and install the inverter. It's very simple to do. Just a little time, a little routing of the wires to make it look pretty. So yeah, that's a done project. Till the next one. I've already got one in my head. It's always something else I need to work on.